Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jai Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki, Shri Shri Nitaya Gaura Hari ki, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Nitaya Gaura Premanande. So, Hare Krishna everyone. Thank you all so much for joining this morning. And thank you so much for the service of presenting this class on chapter 23 of Krishna book. Om Jnanatimidandasya Gnanangina Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavari Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So Krishna book is based on the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the pastimes of Krishna. And this chapter, 23, is called Delivering the Wives of the Brahmanas Who Performed Sacrifices. So I pray for all your blessings to do justice to this class so that we can understand the message of the Lord and His pastimes. So we'll start reading. The morning passed, and the cowherd boys were very hungry because they had not eaten breakfast. They immediately approached Krishna and Balaram and said, "Dear Krishna and Balaram, you are both all-powerful. You can kill many, many demons. But today we are much afflicted with hunger, and this is disturbing us. Please arrange for something that will mitigate our hunger." So it's a very interesting way to start the chapter, because we may think that in spiritual life we're encouraged not to take service from Krishna, not to ask Him for anything. But this chapter is beginning with a request from the cowherd boys for something, right? And we may think they're asking for something like foodstuffs, right? Something they could sort of take care of themselves, right? Not something very extraordinary. They're not even asking him to kill a demon for the good of the world. But this request is very important if we consider what the cowherd boys intend. There's an interesting theme that will play out through this chapter about self-interest. And the cowherd boys, they didn't have any self-interest at all. Hare Krishna Prabhu. The cowherd boys, when they were requesting something from Krishna, they were actually requesting it for Krishna. So that's very interesting. This comes about because the cowherd boys are not acting on the same platform as us. On this current platform that we're all on, we're acting from our false ego. And our false ego is very much trying to protect us, trying to ensure that everything that we do is in our self-interest. Right? So we make those calculations before we do anything. Right? In the material world, and also when we come to devotional service. Until we're purified of the influence of the false ego, we're all thinking, how is this, even if it's a service, how is it actually going to benefit me? Or how is it going to work in my favor? Or how does it suit me? Right? This is what goes on in our minds, because we're still on the platform of the false ego. But eventually, we want to reach the absolute platform, where everything that we think about is actually for Krishna only. It's called absolute, and where we are right now is a relative platform, because what I'm thinking about is relative to my good, what you're thinking about is relevant to your good, and like that. Right? We'll take an example. We want to prepare some cooked offering for Krishna. Right? So we all start off on the one platform of understanding that it must be sattvic ingredients, right? We'll all agree with that. But then, when it comes down to the actual preparation, that's where everybody differs. Right? Somebody wants more spices. Somebody doesn't want to use oil. Somebody else prefers butter, right? Everybody has their own idea of how this should be done, even though we say we're doing it for Krishna. Because we're still on the relative platform of what is good for me, and you are thinking what is good for you. But these cowherd boys have achieved an absolute level where they actually only think about what is good for Krishna. So them, the other residents of Vrindavan, Mother Yashoda prepares a preparation, it's only Krishna in mind, not how she thinks this should be made, how she would like it if she is going to eat it afterwards, right? It's only Krishna's interest. So the cowherd boys are also, they're making this request for their lunch in Krishna's interest. And this is how they actually, that's how they perform all activities on the absolute plane. It's all for Krishna. So this is how the verse in Bhagavad Gita from chapter 4 says that the person making the offering can actually be of the same nature, the same spiritual nature. Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagno, Brahmanahutam. Brahmaiva tena gantavyam, Brahma karma samadhina. Right? You become of the same nature as the Lord. This is actually a much more elevated level than actually wanting to become one with Him, because that's not possible. It's no more possible than I can become one with you, right, in any way. But if we become of the same mindset, it's almost like that, isn't it? If we think alike, if we feel alike. So in the same way, when we come to the absolute platform and we're suddenly thinking exactly what will please God in a perfect level, that's quite extraordinary. That's the real oneness. And we'll discuss that a bit further on. So let's read a bit more and see how the cowherd boys were understanding Krishna's mind. Requested in this way by their friends, Lord Krishna and Balaram arranged to show compassion to certain wives of Brahmanas who were performing sacrifices. So we see through that request, Krishna and Balaram are going to show some special mercy to the wives of the Brahmanas. So definitely this request was in their interest. It wasn't the cowherd boys actually being hungry. So this was the Lord's purpose that the boys understood. So Krishna says, he said, "My dear friends, please go to the house of the Brahmanas nearby. They are now engaged in performing the Vedic sacrifice known as Angirasa, for they desire elevation to the heavenly planets." Right? So it's important to note that this Vedic sacrifice, right, it sounds very fancy, but it was actually just to attain a higher destination, right? Just like slightly more fancier travel somewhere. That's what the sacrifice was for. Then Lord Krishna warned his friends, these Brahmanas are not Vaishnavas. They cannot even chant our names, Krishna and Balaram. They are very busy in chanting the Vedic hymns, although the purpose of Vedic knowledge is to find me. But because they are not attracted by the names of Krishna and Balaram, you better not ask them for anything in my name. Better ask for some charity in the name of Balaram. So it's a very interesting point that even though these Brahmanas, of course, very educated spiritually, and they're very revered in society materially, they can't appreciate the holy names of Krishna. And this is something that we are not safe from, even if we have come to devotional service. Because just as they are a little bit or very distracted by trying to get material things, if we get distracted by trying to get material things when we are in devotional service, then we can also lose taste and appreciation for chanting Krishna's names. So these instructions are not just for these Brahmanas, because they're not devotees. It can happen to those who are devotees as well. Right? As soon as we allow, or as soon as we continue our material pursuit of material things, this is what happens. Right? We lose appreciation. We can actually stop chanting the holy names of Krishna. And so these brahmanas, they weren't going to be moved by the fact that the cowherd boys would mention Krishna and Balaram to them, even though the irony is in the Vedic mantras, or all the Vedic mantras are actually different names of Krishna. Right? The Vedic mantras are initiated by the chanting of Om, and Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that he is actually Om. Right? This is how he's embedded in the Vedas, but these brahmanas, they haven't come yet to this realization. So that's the great irony. And because of that, Krishna tells the cowherd boys that they're looking superficially at these things, and they're going to think that you are just cowherd boys coming on behalf of another cowherd boy, Krishna. And Krishna is considered the son of Nanda Maharaj, right, who is a cowherd man, who's a Vaishya. Right? That's in society the third order. Right? So it's lower than the Brahmanas. So Krishna says, you may have some better luck if you mention the name of Balaram, because Balaram is known as the son of Vasudeva, and Vasudeva is a Kshatriya. He's a king. So maybe they might want to give you something if you mention that. So it's just indicating the mindset of these people, how they're thinking only in terms of social order, and how problematic that is, because it's not considering the quality of the person. It's not considering that the quality of this supreme person is obviously their Lord, the one that they're performing the sacrifices for. Right? So it's a very dangerous mentality, because it actually leads them to missing the opportunity to serve him. But the important point is that the cowherd boys, they disregard Krishna's instruction out of their love for him. Right? They still mention his name because they don't consider those externals. Right? They still mention the name of Krishna first when they approach these brahmanas, because for them the status of Krishna is not important. Right? He's their most loving friend. So we may consider another point here. If Krishna knows that the wives are pure devotees already, and he wants to bless them, why is he sending the cowherd boys to the brahmanas when he also knows they're not devotees? And they're probably not going to have a lot of luck getting any food stuff from them anyway. We think that he should probably send the cowherd boys straight to the wives, right? Because they're going to offer some service with love. So the reason is that that Krishna wanted to glorify the behavior of the wives by noting first the behavior of the husbands. Right? That despite being so elevated, despite their learning, still the wives were on an even more elevated platform, because they transcended that, right, through their love for Krishna. So we will appreciate the behavior of the wives more when we see the behavior of the husbands. Right? This is a transcendental arrangement of Krishna. So the boys went to the brahmanas, and they approached them with a lot of respect, as they were servants of Krishna. And another interesting point is that they wished them all good fortune. This is important because the boys, while coming to engage the brahmanas in service, are not begging for food stuff. That's not the primary reason they're there. Right? They're bringing the good fortune of devotional service to these brahmanas. Right? An opportunity that does not come very easily. An opportunity that comes after millions and millions of lifetimes. So in the same way, when we approach people, you're not going to beg for donations or for help. Right? You're going to give them the opportunity to serve Krishna. And that's why Srila Prabhupada had said very famously, I have come not to take anything but to give. Right? This was his supreme magnanimity. All devotees are magnanimous like that. So they were already hinting to the brahmanas that this is for you that we're coming. It's not for us. Right? And they also address them as the knowers of religious principles, that they should know that what they are already doing, all these sacrifices, is indirectly for Krishna's service anyway, right? Because all sacrifices, Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, are for Vishnu. The names of Vishnu are usually chanted in these sacrifices. But now you're getting a direct opportunity to serve Krishna. He's coming to you directly for something, right? You don't have to feed the foodstuffs or the offerings into the fire, right, for him to get it. You can actually give it to him. And this is the importance of direct service. Right? We also get the opportunity to offer something directly to Krishna. We don't have to go the roundabout way, right, to offering sacrifices or anything else. And this is the importance of Bhakti Yoga in particular. It allows you to skip everything else and directly serve Krishna. So it shows that although the boys were considered of the third order, although these brahmanas considered them lower, they were the ones who actually knew the Vedic principles. They understood this, right? That this was actually such a priceless opportunity, and they understood Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita, which are actually the Bhagavad Gita is actually a summary of the Vedic teachings. And there Krishna says that all yagya, all sacrifices, including what the brahmanas are doing, that's all for the satisfaction of Krishna. Everything. So, again, weighing out against serving Krishna directly, the brahmanas should have immediately taken that opportunity to give something to the boys for Krishna's pleasure. And even if they made the argument that, wait a minute, the sacrifice is not complete and you can only take food stuff afterwards, right? It's actually noted by the boys, because of their great knowledge, right, that at this kind of sacrifice, the food stuff could be taken before the conclusion. The boys had such wide knowledge that they're actually instructing the brahmanas that, you know what, we know certain sacrifices you can actually take foodstuff before it's concluded. So this is this kind of sacrifice. So again, they may not have been knowers of the Vedas and studying like the brahmanas did, but through their service to Krishna, they already understood everything perfectly. So the problem, of course, is that the brahmanas were too ritualistic to actually understand this, right? They were too much into what they were doing and considering how important to them this was. And it's also another note for us to make, that we shouldn't also become too ritualistic in our service to Krishna, because it actually distracts us from the purpose, right? And that's what happened here. They were distracted from serving the actual goal of their sacrifice. So they just ignored the boys, just ignored them, which is much worse than saying no, right? If somebody says no, it's clear. But if they ignore you, if they don't even give you, like, you know, the benefit of a no, it's not nice. So the boys are very disappointed. And then Prabhupada says, despite being highly elevated in the knowledge of Vedic sacrificial rites, all such non-devotee brahmanas, although they think of themselves as highly elevated, are ignorant, foolish persons. So it sounds a little bit harsh, but we need to understand why these statements are being made. Right? These brahmanas, and they're going to admit to this later on, they're responsible for instructing all of society. Right? They are actually the teachers of all people. Even now, but more so then. And if you are responsible for teaching, but you don't understand what you're teaching, then you're doing the hugest disservice to your students. Right? So they're teaching the Vedas. They're going through so much to teach the Vedas, to learn the Vedas themselves, actually. Right? The Vedas are very complex, they're very vast, they're very elevated subject matter. But if all they're thinking about it is that it's going to take you to some higher state of enjoyment, which you're going to fall down from anyway, then what is all of that learning for? Isn't it just a fancier way to go to a slightly more enjoyable destination in the material world, where you're still going to suffer? Is all this complexity of the Vedas, this vast, this advanced civilization, is that all it's for? And we have to think about this, right? Because there are easier ways to get to heaven. It's true. You don't have to go through the Vedas. So why is it there? There must be a higher purpose. And this is what Krishna summarizes for us in the Bhagavad Gita. Because the knowledge of the body and soul is the basic knowledge that he gives. But he builds up on it, explaining different yogas, different ways that people can eventually link up to him to achieve transcendence. Shri Shri Radharanath ki, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Srila Giraj Govardhan Hari ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. So the Vedas are actually meant to help us to achieve transcendence. Right? Transcendence is the goal. A plane of existence where no miseries of this world exists. Because even in the higher planets, the miseries exist. Even in the higher planets, you can fall. From transcendence, you don't fall. Okay? This is actually what the Vedas is for. But the Brahmanas are being distracted by the flowery language. And this is the problem. Right? They're just trying to help their followers to get to a slightly more fun vacation. Right? Fun state of life. This is why Srila Prabhupada speaks so strongly about it. Therefore, their knowledge of the Vedas is useless. Right? We have to do the great service to get people out of this material world once and for all. That is what the Vedas is actually for. That is what Krishna is teaching in Bhagavad Gita. Lord Chaitanya therefore gave his valuable opinion that although a person may not be born in a Brahmana family, if he knows Krishna or the science of Krishna consciousness, he is more than a Brahmana and he is quite fit to become a spiritual master. So this is not putting down the Brahmanas at all, it's encouraging them to do better, right? To be better, to actually understand what the goal of the Vedas is and to lead people properly, right? To be better teachers, to be better spiritual masters, right? And that's a responsibility that we all actually have as well. So we continue reading about sacrifices. All these are for satisfying Krishna. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that he is the actual enjoyer of all sacrifices, because he is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Supreme Absolute Truth beyond the conception or speculation of the material senses. Right? And Krishna again, he states this in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktaram yagya tapasam sarva loka maheshwaram suhridam sarva bhutanam kyatvamam shanti mrishati. And this Bhagavad Gita, it's fundamental to all philosophical traditions in India. Actually, all of them have to produce commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita to be even considered philosophically sound, to be respected. So that this knowledge is available, and still people are missing the point of Krishna being the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and everything being meant for his service. It's simply because, like these cowherd boys, they take him to be an ordinary boy or an ordinary person who just incarnated for a while and taught some moral lessons and then left. Right? This is the problem. And yet that beautiful and special form is Krishna's way of reciprocating with his devotees, so they can enjoy loving pastimes with him. Right? And unfortunately, because these Brahmanas don't understand it, they miss the opportunity to serve him in that very accessible form, that way that he makes himself available to all of us. The Brahmanas were very much interested in the comforts of the material body and in elevation to the higher planetary residences called Swargavasa. They were therefore completely unable to understand the position of Krishna. Okay? So blinded by material things, this is actually what happens to us. They ignored the boys. So the boys were disappointed. They went back to Krishna, and he smiled. Right? He wasn't disappointed. He knew this was going to happen, and of course he's very he's self-contained. He doesn't need to be acknowledged by anybody. He's still God. That's not going to change, even if the Brahmanas don't acknowledge it. Right? It's for their sake, actually, and he makes that point in his next statement to the boys. He told them that they should not be sorry for being refused by the Brahmanas, because that is the way of begging. He convinced them that one who is engaged in collecting or begging should not think that he will be successful everywhere. He may be unsuccessful in some places, but that should not be the cause for disappointment. Because they're not begging for things. They're begging to give these persons the opportunity for devotional service. Right? And this is an important instruction to us 5,000 years later, because we are doing the same thing. We're approaching people in that spirit of begging them to take to the service of Krishna for their own good. Right? Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did this, Lord Nityananda did this. And sometimes people are going to refuse simply because they're not yet ready for that opportunity, just like the Brahmanas. Right? And that is something we have to appreciate, and we have to actually leave that outcome to Krishna to decide. Right? Our part in it is to present them that opportunity on behalf of the Lord. This is very pleasing to him. He was pleased with the boys. He wasn't upset they didn't bring him anything, and he didn't tell them to go and fight or get what he wanted from the Brahmanas. Right? The principle was there, that they had approached them, and this is what we do as preachers on his behalf. Lord Krishna then asked all the boys to go again, but this time to the wives of those Brahmanas engaged in sacrifices. He also informed them that these wives are great devotees. They are always absorbed in thinking of us. Go there and ask for some food in my name and in the name of Balaram. So we see now Krishna is saying, mention my name. You can mention my name, right? They have love for me. They will appreciate my holy names. And I'm sure that they will deliver you as much food as you desire. Right? So now the boys again, right? This time they go to the wives of the Brahmanas. And these wives, Srila Prabhupada said, they were so absorbed in thinking of Krishna that they were like mystic yogis. The mystic yogis get absorbed in meditation, and we see the pictures of them, so absorbed that they don't know that life forms are growing on them, right? Creepers and in the case of Valmiki Muni, an anthill grew up around him. They're so absorbed in their meditation that they actually can't be disturbed by the externals of the body. And even though these may seem like ordinary women of the world, they were in the same kind of absorption. They were in that same absorption on Krishna, and therefore they got the actual benefit of that absorption. Because when the yogis are absorbed, what are they doing? They're actually coming in contact with the super soul in the heart. Only these wives are going to get the opportunity to actually see the super soul himself, right? The Supreme Personality of Godhead in front of them. So then the boys approached them and said that Krishna and Balaram were nearby. And so this was actually the hint to the ladies that they could actually go and see Krishna, because this is what they had wanted for so long, right? So they didn't just get ready to give the boys the food, they actually took it themselves. Immediately upon hearing this, the wives of the Brahmanas became anxious for Krishna and Balaram. So again, of the same mind of the Lord. They're not actually even anxious for themselves first, they're anxious that the Lord needs to eat. These reactions were spontaneous. They did not have to be convinced of the importance of Krishna and Balaram. Immediately upon hearing their names, they became very eager to see them. Right? So this is the effect of when we hear the holy names of Krishna purely, when we have no material attachments. Then when we hear the name of Krishna, there's a spontaneous attraction. So we sometimes feel that attraction at the beginning of our spiritual life. The first time we hear the holy names being chanted somewhere, we're shopping or doing something else, and then we become attracted. Because initially we're not making any offenses, because we're not holding on to our material attachments. But if we then take to spiritual life and we're chanting the holy names, but we're maintaining the material attachments, because that's what the 10th offense says. It says if you maintain your material attachments, that's the offense to the holy name. Okay, that's when we lose that attraction. And we wonder why it doesn't feel the same as it did in the beginning. Right? This is because of those attachments that we still have. These wives of the Brahmanas had absolutely no attachments, because as soon as they had the opportunity to serve Krishna, they left everything. Right? They didn't just leave their homes and their families because their husbands and their brothers and their fathers tried to stop them. Sanatana Goswami says it implies their mothers as well. But they were leaving their reputations, right? Because it's really bad in Vedic society as a female to disregard all the members of your family and just go off to see a male, right? As their family members might think of it. And the reputation is very hard for us to give up. And we'll see that they were even prepared to give up their bodies. That's a point that we'll see later on. So they had absolutely no attachments whatsoever. And this was their qualification for seeing Krishna. It said that they went to their most beloved object exactly in the way that rivers flow to the sea. Right? It was so natural for them. For a long time, the wives had been eager to see Krishna. When a devotee is called by the attraction of Krishna, he does not care for bodily ties, because these ties are on the basis of the body. But the real attraction is on the basis of the soul. And this is the platform that the wives were on. They were past the body already. Right? The Brahmana's wife saw Krishna with a blackish complexion, wearing a garment that glittered like gold. He wore a nice garland of forest flowers and a peacock feather on his head. He was also painted with the minerals found in Vrindavan, and he looked exactly like a dancing actor on a theatrical stage. They saw him resting one hand on the shoulder of his friend, and in his other hand he was holding a lotus flower. His ears were decorated with lilies. He wore marks of tilak, and he was smiling charmingly. With their very eyes, the wives of the Brahmanas saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, of whom they had heard so much, who was so dear to them, and in whom their minds were always absorbed. Now they saw him eye to eye and face to face, and Krishna entered within their hearts through their eyes. Within themselves they began to embrace Krishna to their heart's content. And it's described that this is like the great sages who try to merge into the existence of God. Right? But they can only try to do this because it isn't actually possible. Right? It's not possible for them to do that. But here, the wives were achieving a kind of oneness in existence. Right? And Srila Prabhupada explains it. When a lover submits to his lover without any pinch of personal consideration, that is called oneness. Lord Chaitanya has taught us this feeling of oneness in his Shri Shikshashtaka. Krishna may act freely, doing whatever he likes, but the devotee should always be in oneness or in agreement with his desires. This is what we were saying earlier on. No self-interest, but only an interest in what Krishna's desires are. Right? Absolutely, as Prabhupada says, not a pinch of personal consideration. This is the ultimate stage of spiritual realization. That's the real oneness, right, that we can achieve. But Krishna doesn't lose his identity in that. He's always God. He's always the Supreme. We are always his servants. Right? The wives maintain their individuality. But what's the special feature of that is that in that individuality, there is so much enjoyment for Krishna, right? That kind of love, that unconditional, unselfish love. There's so much enjoyment for him and there's so much enjoyment for the devotee. When you're trying to lose your existence, right, like these... like the yogis try to do, then you don't get that enjoyment. You don't actually get to experience that. So in giving up one's own self-interest, it's not that you lose anything, because that's the big fear, right? That's why we're always trying to protect ourselves. We're always trying to make sure we don't get taken advantage of, that, something always works in our favor. We're taking care of ourselves. We sort of have that feeling that no one else is going to do it. But on the spiritual platform, you give up that sense of taking care of yourself, and you only care about Krishna and taking care of Krishna, and what happens? He takes care of you, right? Completely. The boys don't even have to worry about what they're going to get to eat, or to speak of anything else. Everything is taken care of by Krishna. He doesn't let his devotees down, and he's going to display that as well with these Brahmanas' wives. For caring about him only and his interest in being fed, they are also going to be taken care of. They came just to see him who was their life and soul. They were exactly following Krishna's instruction in the Bhagavad Gita. One should surrender to him, giving up all varieties of occupational and religious duties. He therefore began to speak to them, smiling very magnificently. My dear wives of the Brahmanas, you are all very fortunate and are welcome here. Please let me know what I can do for you. You are coming here to see me, neglecting all the restrictions and hindrances of relatives, fathers, brothers, and husbands, is completely befitting. One who does this actually knows his self-interest. Right? Because rendering transcendental loving service unto me without motive or restriction is actually auspicious for the living entities. Right? So this is Krishna's instruction again. You give up your self-interest. you engage only in my service, only thinking of me, everything is taken care of by Krishna. This is the real auspiciousness for us. Right? Our life, property, home, wife, children, house, country, society, and paraphernalia, which are all dear to us, are expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the central object of love, because He gives us all bliss, expanding Himself in so many ways according to our different situations, namely bodily, mental, or spiritual. So even though it may seem that everything in this world is for our self-interest, it's all an expansion of Krishna meant for His service. And when you use it for His service, you actually fulfill the purpose of those things. Right? And then it becomes auspicious for you. When you use it for yourself, it brings you karma, it brings you reactions, it brings you trouble, it brings you bondage to this world. So this is the way to properly utilize everything for Krishna. So now He's given them the instructions. They've got His association, they gave Him the offerings. What does He do? He tells them to go back. They have finally gained the Lord of their life, and then they lose Him. Right? So Krishna tells them it's because your husbands need you for their sacrifice. Right? The Brahmanas are defined by their wives because they're householders. You can only be a householder if you have a wife, right? So unless the wives are there, they can't act as householders. And they're performing the sacrifices, right? The Vedic sacrifice they're doing, Angirasa, they're doing it as householders. It's their type of sacrifice. Bhagavad Gita also explains the different types of sacrifices according to whichever stage of life you're in, right? There's sacrifices for brahmacharis, there's sacrifices for householders, there's sacrifices for vanaprasthas, and there's sacrifices for sannyasis. Bhagavatam also explains this. So the brahmanas, they can't make these sacrifices unless the wives are there, because they're not householders then. Right? And how are they going to make advancement? Because they're not yet at the level of the wives. Right? It's very important that we don't think that the point of this history, this pastime, is that everybody should just give up all their duties and try and artificially attain Krishna like these wives did. Right? If you're not at that level that they were at, you have to engage in the services that are appropriate for your level until you can get to that level. Right? So the husbands were not that advanced, so they had to continue the sacrifices so that eventually they could become that advanced. This is why all the sacrifices are given, so that we can all become purified gradually. If you're fortunate to come directly to devotional service, then you act on that platform. But if you're not, like these brahmanas, then you have to act according to your duty. This is what Krishna says. Don't artificially give up your duty. So for them, He wanted them to continue it. And He wanted the wives to go and assist them. This was their duty. And the wives were very upset. Right? They're not going to, they're like, our husbands and our families are not going to accept us anyway. How can we go back? You have to give us shelter. Right? So there's many reasons why the Brahmana's wives can't stay with the Lord at this point. Right? It's important for us to understand. Krishna wasn't going to give them explanations on Dharma, because as pure devotees they had already surpassed Dharma. So telling them that you're actually, or the Brahmin caste, actually Brahmin, like a Brahmin woman can't actually marry anyone who's from a lower caste socially. Or the fact that, the Brahman's wife is actually considered a mother. Right? They were already beyond all of those things. But they were not yet on that completely spiritual level to stay with Krishna also. So they're sort of in between. Right? They needed to achieve the spiritual forms of gopis in order to engage in the kind of loving relationship with Krishna that they wanted. Right? So they had to still go and complete their term in their material bodies in order to achieve that. So Krishna assured them that they would in time, but at this point it wasn't possible for them, right? Even though they had achieved that great love. And they were also meant to perform a special duty as devotees. They needed to go help the fallen, their husbands. Right? A devotee doesn't only think of staying with Krishna. They think about how they can go out and help others to come to Krishna. That was their duty now. Right? That's what they had to do for their husbands. And therefore Krishna said that don't worry about it. They'll actually appreciate you more now for what you have done. Okay, and Prabhupada says that a devotee of Krishna, a pure devotee of Krishna becomes pleasing to everybody. Okay, he also says that nor can any sane person be an enemy of a pure devotee. And there's a little bit of craziness in Kali Yuga, so we can't expect that everybody is going to always appreciate what we're doing. But the important thing is that we endeavor, right, to be friendly and merciful to everybody. This is a duty of a devotee. And he told them that they would still be united with him in their meditation, right? They were still absorbed in him. That is the way that they would be with him. So it said that one of the Brahmana's wives who had been stopped, she actually gave up her body. She wanted to be with Krishna so much that she, when she was held back and she couldn't go, she was so detached from everything, including the body, she just went directly to the spiritual world. Right? But this is again a very elevated level. Right? We can't try to give up the body voluntarily to try and achieve Krishna at our level. Right? We need to be as pure as these devotees are to even imagine such a thing. Right? So this is not something that's applicable to us at all. So the Lord enjoyed the food. The wives went back, and the husbands and the families did actually appreciate them very much, and the sacrifices, it went on very nicely. Now the Brahmanas, they start to lament. Right? They start to lament that they weren't as elevated as their wives, that they didn't take the opportunity to serve Krishna. They actually condemned themselves. They condemned all this learning, all this advanced status in society, because it was their hindrance. Right? It was their obstacle. This is the problem when we become elevated in any position, right? Even in devotional service. If we allow the pride to kick in, then it actually pulls us down to the lower platform. The Brahmana is on the level of goodness, so it's actually a very elevated level, but it's still within the material world. So if we allow pride to affect us, that is the actual problem with goodness. We become a bit proud that, we're in such a nice position, and those poor people who are not on my level and all of that, right? Pride is subtle, but it creeps in, and this is actually the cause of fall down. So we were discussing the other day that that's why even material qualities of goodness are not what we're ultimately trying to achieve. We're trying to go even beyond that. It's like a stepping stone, but it's not the ultimate level, because if you're there, you're still in the material energy. In those qualities of goodness, it means that equally as much as you can go higher, you can also fall lower. That's the material world. You have to aim for transcendence. Like we're saying, the real goal of the Vedas, aiming for the ultimate level. Okay. So the Brahmanas felt that their qualities were actually a hindrance to them, because the pride led to them falling from the opportunity to serve Krishna. Although we expert Brahmanas are considered to be the teachers of all other sections of human society, we have been illusioned by the external energy. Right? So despite the elevated level, they fell under the illusion of Maya, of Krishna's external energy. So even though the wives were on the same, looking as if they were on the same level as the husbands, why didn't they fall under illusion? They were under the protection of Krishna's internal energy. When you come under the protection of the internal energy, Srimati Radharani, then you don't fall victim to the external energy. And you come under Radharani's protection in devotional service. Just see how fortunate these women are. They have so devotedly dedicated their lives to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, that they easily did what is ordinarily so difficult. They gave up their family connections, which are just like a dark well for the continuation of material miseries. Women in general, being very simple at heart, can very easily take to Krishna consciousness. And when they develop love of Krishna, they can easily get liberation from the clutches of Maya, which are very difficult for even so-called intelligent and learned men to surpass. So these apparently negative qualities of simple-heartedness, right, the emotion of women that is often spoken of, that becomes to one's credit, right, when one uses it in Krishna's service, right? It elevates one to the level of becoming pure devotees, like these wives. And then the apparently coveted qualities, the intelligence, the learnedness, if it's not used in Krishna's service, it becomes detrimental, right? Like what happened here. The Brahmanas continued, according to Vedic injunction, women are not allowed to undergo the purificatory process of initiation by the sacred thread, nor are they allowed to live as brahmacharinis in the ashram of the spiritual master, nor are they advised to undergo the strict disciplinary procedures, nor are they very expert in discussing the philosophy of self-realization, and by nature they are not very pure, nor are they very much attached to auspicious activities. Therefore, how wonderful it is that these women have developed transcendental love for Krishna, the Lord of all mystic yogis. They have surpassed all of us in firm faith and devotion unto Krishna. Although we are considered to be masters in all purificatory processes, we did not actually know what their goal is because we are too much attached to the materialistic way of life. Even though we were reminded of Krishna and Balaram by the cowherd boys, we disregarded them. We now think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply played a trick of mercy on us by sending his friends to beg food from us. Otherwise, he has no need to send them. He could have satisfied their hunger then and there by just willing to do so. So this is another important point before we close. Krishna is known as the husband of the goddess of fortune. He has every opulence in creation. He doesn't need to go and get food from anybody. He was just giving them an opportunity to serve him, right? This is what they eventually realized. But even though they were repenting like this, they wanted to go personally to offer their obeisances unto him, but being afraid of Kamsa, they could not go to Krishna and surrender to him. So much repentance, but still they were not purified, right, of all their material contamination. Still some attachment was holding them back, right, which is their allegiance to Kamsa, right? That they still need the king to be beneficial to them. So unlike the wives who gave up everything, they're still being held back, right? So this is an important point that we close with. It is very difficult for one to surrender fully unto the personality of Godhead without being purified by devotional service. So you can come to the realization in any other phase of life, in any other maybe even any other religious process. But unless you become purified by devotional service to Krishna of all of the things that would hold you back, your sinful reactions and so on, you're not going to be able to approach God directly. Right? That's the bottom line. So even though they had all this realization, they didn't have the good fortune of being able to approach the Lord. The example of the learned Brahmanas and their wives is vivid. The wives of the Brahmanas, because they were inspired by pure devotional service, did not care for any kind of opposition. Right? They immediately went to Krishna. But the Brahmanas, although they had come to know the supremacy of the Lord and were repenting, were still afraid of King Kamsa because they were too addicted to fruitive activities. Right? So near and so far. Right? Only devotional service purifies you of that want for material things, that self-interest, right? Situates you in the interest of the Supreme Lord. This is how we can achieve him. So thank you so much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Are there any questions or comments? Anything to clarify, correct? Thank you. Anyone else? Anything to question? Okay. Thank you so much. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Shri Gaura Premanande. Hare Krishna.